Good morning, everyone. I have to confess that talking at a blank screen is one of the more surreal assemblies I've ever delivered, but here we go. It's new for all of us. It's perhaps quite fitting, given the psychological impact of the coronavirus, that psychology gets its turn on the assembly rota. Already the coronavirus appears to have had a substantial effect on the world's collective psyche, and it's highly likely that in the UK we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, as scenes from Italy paint a pretty stark reminder of what lies ahead. Now, I'm not going to start by making a case for why psychology is so important as a subject. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to make your own mind up. Instead, I'm going to focus on some lessons that I think we can learn from psychology as we approach these quite unprecedented times. Anyone studying IB psychology will be familiar with something called social identity theory. The main thrust of this is that as humans, we naturally want to form close bonds with people we see as belonging to our in-group. This might be a group based on our gender, our nationality, our race, or our social class, but these groups can also be as specific as our regional identity, a football club we support, or even our music or artistic taste. Once these shared group identities are formed, we tend to view those who are not part of our in-group, in other words the out-group, in a much more negative light. We often stereotype them and prejudice or discriminate against them, and we do whatever we can to maximise the status of our in-group relative to them. In the post-corona world, we've seen our fair share of this, not least from the leader of the free world. Donald Trump's insistence in calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus is a barely disguised attempt to distance his in-group, white Americans, from any blame for the situation. And indeed, hate crimes towards Asian Americans have soared as a result, many of whom have never even been to China and are no more Chinese than Donald Trump himself. This example shows the dangers of our instinctive need to belong to a group, and it's wise that we each think carefully about how unquestioningly we associate ourselves with a strong group identity, and to be aware of the effect it can have on the other group. Now, one way of overcoming this group identity effect is to recognise our shared humanity rather than focusing on group differences. And one positive that's actually come from the coronavirus outbreak has been the surge in acts of kindness towards others, such as shopping for people who are self-isolating. The virus has actually created a sense amongst many in the global community that we are all battling together against a non-human aggressor, and therefore emphasises our shared human identity. There is a sense that all of humanity is our in-group, and the virus is now the out-group. Now, psychologists call this selfless positive behaviour towards others pro-social behaviour, and thankfully, so far the outbreak has seen more instances of this than antisocial behaviour. Though it remains to be seen how people will react if really draconian measures are enforced for too long, and people can no longer bear it socially or economically. Will we start to see antisocial behaviour on the rise? Now, for many of you in the school community, this will be your first day at home learning in this new virtual world that we're educating you in. And there may actually be a sense of novelty and excitement. I can guarantee that this will not always be the case. Having indeed spoken to a friend at a school in Italy who have now been in lockdown for 4 weeks, he says that in the initial novelty, it will wear off. And there'll be aspects that you will really struggle with as time goes by. Those who have been self-isolating already for some time may start to be feeling the negative effects already of not seeing your friends, not getting to exercise properly, and so on. So, what can psychology tell us about how to handle the next few weeks or even months? The field of positive psychology has focused on what helps us to lead happy and fulfilling lives, and I believe there are some useful lessons to be learnt for us as we enter this period of huge change. Martin Seligman is the figurehead for positive psychology, and he came up with the acronym PERMA to identify the key areas that contribute to our sense of well-being. The P of PERMA stands for positive emotions. And it seems obvious, but in order to feel happy, we need, on balance, to be feeling more positive emotions like joy, contentment, compassion and love than negative emotions like fear, sadness or anger. Some psychologists have even gone as far as to suggest a golden ratio, that we need to experience 3 positive emotions to every 1 negative emotion in order to flourish. This means that the majority of our interactions with people, on the whole, need to be positive, joyful, humorous or kind, rather than negative, critical, angry or unkind. As we enter a period of social distancing, we need to find ways of maintaining these positive emotions, something that I believe is possible if we focus on being positive with those that we do live with, i.e. your family, as well as those that we interact with online. As Brits, we have an uncanny knack of seeing the funny side of things, however dark, and this sense of satire and irony can actually help raise our spirits in times of trouble. The wave of coronavirus memes that seem to be travelling around cyberspace at the moment are a good example of this. And the reality is you do still need to laugh and should not feel guilty about doing this. The E of PERMA stands for engagement. And one of the key findings of positive psychology is the need to live an engaging life. So what does this look like? Engagement means that our life has a sufficient amount of rewarding activities which have a high degree of challenge and require a high degree of skill. One of my favourite psychologists, if for no other reason than his name, is a Czech called Michal Csikszentmihalyi. He's written extensively about a concept called flow, which is when we're so engaged in an activity that we don't notice the passing of time. And many people who manage to get into states of flow regularly report that these often become very peak experiences in their lives. Csikszentmihalyi found that activities that are both highly challenging but just within our capability and which require a high degree of skill tend to lead to these feelings of flow. So, playing an instrument at a challenging level, competing at a sport that we've worked hard to get good at, writing a speech or performing a play are all likely to lead to this feeling of flow. And as coronavirus traps you at home, use this as an opportunity to increase your engagement level in some sort of activity. Perhaps learn an instrument or try a composition. Try and write a poem or a story. Design a website. Learn a strategy game like chess or bridge. The key is that the activity has to require a high degree of skill and be challenging but not too challenging, i.e. impossible. While some of the school's usual extracurricular activities won't be possible next term without physical proximity, many of them actually will, and there may even be new opportunities to form new clubs and societies. So use this as an opportunity to find fresh hobbies that will mentally challenge you and increase your feeling of engagement. R stands for relationships. Whilst relationships matter to all humans, they are particularly important to people of your age. Indeed, psychologists have found using brain scanning that the brains of teenagers are particularly wired to feel pleasure from social interactions and pain from social rejection or social isolation. More than ever, as we enter this period of social distancing, it's vital that you try to maintain your social relationships. But we all know that online communications present their challenges. When we're not face to face with someone, our communications are so open to misinterpretation. A comment meant in jest can quickly cause offence without the facial signals or tone of voice that we pick up on without even knowing it. And our imagination, so influenced by our current mood, is left to fill in the blanks. The use of video messaging, FaceTime or Google Meet, can help to overcome this and might be one way of us all preserving our sanity. More than anything though, by aiming for the golden ratio of 3-to-1 positive interactions with those you're living with, you can also improve the relationships you have with them. So be nice to your mum and dad, eh? Now, M stands for meaning, and is about finding a deeper sense of purpose in our lives. Psychologists consistently find that those who report feeling that their lives are in the service of a higher purpose also report a greater sense of well-being. So what do we actually mean by a higher purpose? For some, this might be a religious or political purpose. For others, a goal they see as bigger than just themselves, such as inventing or discovering something that will benefit others, or just working to improve the lives of others in some way. In a world which constantly seems to tempt us to look after number one and seek short-term pleasures, finding a deeper sense of purpose can be elusive, but it is important. School gives us a sense of meaning because it channels us towards activities that are purposeful and that serve the wider community and make us feel part of something bigger than ourselves. But don't let the loss of physical contact be a barrier to this. You can still search for meaning, even in the most desperate of circumstances. Indeed, another of my favourite psychologists is someone called Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian Jew who, in the prime of his career, was unlucky enough to hit the Holocaust and spent several years in Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, where so many perished in the gas chambers or due to disease or malnutrition. He was one of the few who actually survived, and he produced one of the 20th century's greatest books based on his experiences. Man's Search for Meaning is not a lengthy book by any means, and indeed some of you could probably read it in just a few hours, but it offers incredible insights into how finding meaning in the most desperate of circumstances can help us survive and even grow from those experiences. Frankl noticed that some prisoners clung onto a purpose in the camps, even though all possessions, pleasure, humanity and dignity had been robbed of them. They would still find meaning in the smallest acts of kindness, perhaps sharing a piece of bread with someone who was starving, or by clinging onto a dream of a future beyond the camp, where their ambitions might still be realised or their loved ones seen again. For Frankl, he dreamt of surviving the camp so that he could see his family once again and write about his experiences of finding meaning in suffering. Alas, he never saw his family again, all of them were killed, but he did get to write this incredible book. When we start to feel self-pity or even despair at social distancing or self-isolation, it's worth remembering that people like Viktor Frankl endured far, far worse and still found positive growth and purpose in their experiences. You might benefit from looking up and reflecting on some of his quotes over this period, or even reading his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Finally, the A of PERMA stands for accomplishments and refers to our need to achieve success, at least in some domain of our lives. The feeling of accomplishment leads to high self-esteem, and it's why it's so important that we find something that we feel competent at. This coming period is going to present challenges for all of us in this area, not least our Year 11s and Upper 6th, who have had their opportunity for academic accomplishment taken away by the loss of their exams. But sportsmen and women have lost the opportunity to succeed at sport, and our musicians and actors have lost their chances to perform as well. As teachers and parents, a lot of our gratification also comes from seeing you as pupils succeed, and we too will suffer as a result. It's therefore so important that over this period we all keep setting ourselves personal goals that we can achieve in the future, even if it's months before we're able to realise these. Delayed gratification is a key ingredient of life success, and this means being able to wait for our rewards and to continue putting in the hard work without the fun stuff happening straight away. For a sportsman or woman, this might mean doing everything you can to keep fit, at home ready for next season. For the actor or actress, learning the lines on your own, even if you don't know when the performance date is going to be. Or for a musician, keeping up the scales, even though you don't know when the next concert is going to happen. So, to conclude, Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment. Get PERMA right and you're giving yourself the best chance of flourishing, not just over the next few, what is going to be very challenging months, but in life generally.